Please be aware that this episode contains discussions of trauma and emotional distress. Please care for your well-being while listening.
Hello and welcome to Frontline. My name's Andrew James.
And I'm David Gill.
And this is episode 3 of our deep dive into vicarious trauma. And this episode is about holding the weight, what helps and what hurts. And this episode is about individual responses to vicarious trauma and what we can do to improve our ability to effectively manage those situations. And I think this goes back to something, in my mind at least, something that I mentioned when we were having the conversation, David, in episode 1, about how us in caring professions do seem to be the worst at actually taking care of ourselves and looking after our own well-being. Always placed second, third, fourth, fifth priority below everyone else's. I do think there is beginning to be a shift in that. But I think the shift has only really got so far as recognizing we're bad at it. And I think there needs to be now the next step taken in terms of, okay, well then how do we get better? What are your thoughts?
Well, as you were saying that, it reminds me of the SANS's principles around and guide to being trauma informed, the realize, recognize. Hang on, I talk about this all the time, I just get this right. Realize, recognize, respond, and resist. The idea about realizing trauma is real, recognizing signs and symptoms, respond by integrating into policy and procedure, and resist re-traumatization. And if you sort of switch up the language, the same sort of principles can apply to this, which is realize that vicarious trauma is real, recognize the signs and symptoms in staff and yourself, respond by integrating this knowledge into your policies and procedures, particularly around well-being of staff, and resist situations where vicarious trauma can come back. And I think if we think about what you mentioned, we're really getting to that realizing. Some people are thinking about, recognizing the signs and responding. But as a wider sort of culture, I do think we're struggling still at that first hurdle of seeing vicarious trauma as a specific challenge that people are dealing with, rather than this person's just can't hack it, or they're struggling, or that whatever else, what other title we're putting on it that almost implies that we just can't do it. We're not equipped to do the job, rather than maybe that something has triggered something off for us, and we need that sort of further help and support that we might not be getting, both because we're not giving ourselves permission. And as we will see in our final episode, maybe our cultures just aren't there as well.
Well, in this episode, we're going to be hearing about individual strategies. And that is something that really needs to be remembered throughout all of this, is that when you're considering what works for you, it's definitely not going to be a one-size-fits-all situation. And that whatever has worked for a friend or a colleague or a relative, there may have to be some sort of adaptation for have that working specifically for you, but it's at least being aware of those coping mechanisms that is going to help the most, because adaptations can be made on the fly as and when. But if you're not aware of the actual mechanism itself, then it's always going to be difficult to put things into practice.
Not all coping is healthy, but all coping is understandable. Some people shut down, numb out, or escape through alcohol, food, or constant distraction. Although we can look at this objectively now, when you're in the moment, it can be hard to escape an unhealthy coping mechanism. Even some techniques that can be seen as positive, such as exercise, can be used harmfully rather than proactively.
But others do find positive outlets, effective management and colleague connections, an organisation they feel safe in, structured peer support, journaling, therapy, spiritual practices, art and movement. Even laughter has been shown to regulate cortisol and improve emotional resilience. Finding the joy to counter the trauma in our roles can be profound and readdress the balance.
If you and I were walking along the road and witnessed a car accident, for example, a terrible thing that resulted in that was really catastrophic for the people involved, but we were witnesses to that, we might be stood next to each other and have a conversation and might even go, about kind of like how we might both be quite shocked by it. We might have a conversation where we're calming people down. We sort of instantly recognize in that public situation, but that's a difficult thing to deal with.
This is Richie Andrew from Every Man Can.
And we might go for a coffee, we might even stay. And I've heard of people who have both been like part of a situation like that and have stayed in touch and supported each other. We seem to do that quite naturally. But as soon as we get into the work environment, it's like, well, it's my job, I'm getting paid for it. I just have to do it, don't I? I have to get on with it. And it's like, you have to be a different type of human. But that's not the case, is it? We're humans whether at work, we're humans whether we're in our public life. And I think that's the thing. It's like, let's see each other as humans, recognize that we can be vulnerable at different times and we can cope with different things at different times. And that's the culture we need to develop at all different levels. People have had good practices in their life in terms of dealing with the stresses that they've got. That doesn't mean they're always going to be there. It doesn't mean they're always going to work with them as well. So that people need to obviously be reminded to keep revisiting what's working for them and then what isn't working anymore. It can be trends. It can be certain. It could be like, physical activity that they do, but actually they lose interest in a certain activity. So they need to refresh that and try something new. Yeah. And also the idea that there's one route for everyone that works is like the paradigm that has failed the mental health system basically completely. So the idea you've got this gold standard that works for mental health is exactly the problem that we've got ourselves into. Whether you could, this being a good pill taker, being a good accessing therapy that we just know doesn't work for the vast majority of people. Sometimes it's about opening up, sometimes it's about talking, sometimes it's about acknowledging. What would you have? Would you rather have someone who feels supported and is at work but not able to produce as much, or someone who's off work or isn't producing anything at all? They're not productive. So it's like, as an organization, you want productivity, so you need people to be doing the stuff and doing the job. So if you're supporting people and they're better supported, they are more likely to be loyal to you as well. We know that. The people who feel supported and feel like it's part of something, feel part of that work community, they're more likely to feel supported. So that's a culture to build, and it's going to take time. And I think in this country, it's not something we do, stiff upper lip, whatever it might be, like I can deal with it kind of ethos isn't going to wash, it's not going to work longer term. And so it's something we have to get a grips with. And I always think of Finland and their multiple sayings for lowering your expectations, basically. And I think we have quite high expectations. We work hard and work some of the longest hours in Europe over here. And I think that's a culture we need to get underneath the skin of really a bit. We've also got a program called Books for Wellbeing. So we invested just £500 in Middlesbrough libraries and in Redcar libraries to buy, I think it was 12 books in print form, ebook form, and audiobook form. And for ebook and audiobook, there's an app that both councils use called Borrow Books, and it's completely free. It's obviously someone that lives out in anyone, a member of the public can sign up to these, and they give you access to these really high quality sort of self-help books that are full of practical ideas that you can explore. Some of them around habits, some of them around trauma, some of them might be around kind of exploring top tips for like top tips like well-being and personal growth and that kind of thing. And that's been really popular. In fact, it's been a lot more popular than the books on prescription for mental health, and a lot more popular than a lot of the other non-fiction books as well that exist. So this is what I mean. I'm very big on kind of people going on their own journey and actually exploring it, because I think medium long term, that's what it does. So we've got events where we explore these things together, and we've got particularly individual activities that people can engage with, and that also includes managers. We've had managers come into those events and saying, "This is an idea I can take back to my workplace." And then with the journals as well, we've seen organizations do that. They've seen their employees take part in it, and then they're investing in it themselves because they know that there's new employees that are going to come on board, people are going to leave. They want to keep that as part of their ethos. So one of the organizations have invested in developing a journal for service users as well that can be, that staff can use while developing those service users. So a big part of it is sharing stories at an individual level and organizational that says, this is what other organizations have done. This is how individuals have benefited by sharing those stories. Sometimes the stories of individuals, what they did, what worked for them. Sometimes it's about an organised approach, strategic approach that an organisation took, to supporting people, measuring it, seeing the benefits, reviewing it, and carrying on and going in a cycle of understanding that process.
So why do these things work? Because they engage with the nervous system differently. Practices like breath work or grounding exercises can help shift us from fight or flight to a calmer state. Connection, feeling seen and heard, is itself healing.
A 2022 review in the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology found that workers with access to reflective supervision were 40% less likely to report emotional exhaustion. That is a considerable difference.
The key word there? Access. These supports need to be normalised, funded and embedded, not just offered once things break down.
One of my earlier jobs was being an advocate and trying to work out what mental health advocacy was, and I didn't really know what it was, and I explained it incorrectly to people. But being with people who are in mental health services and saying, who's the really good staff? Who's the ones that care? And they would tell you.
This is Dr. Ian Caldwell, CEO of Let's Connect.
And they knew, and everyone in it knew, and they weren't having them conversations to think, so why is this person with this qualification really effective and the other 10 aren't? It was never ever to do with a professional qualification. It was to do with the quality of the person. And I think that taught me not to think about the realness person who came in and who were just themselves. And that person knew, and there was a real connection. And I think that's what we need to do. And that will help people understand other people and ourselves. Quite often you'll get HR people that then go into this, if someone's stressed, so they'll put a sick note in. So first of all, when outside the organisation, seeing a doctor, put a sick note in. You're not allowed to talk to them apart from keep in touch there at some point. Probably doesn't work the first time. You're not having that conversation. You're not helping that person. That person's also distanced themselves from the workplace, the colleagues and resources that can really make a difference. So they're in a worse place. So now you've got a whole system that's not looking out for someone, and someone being forced to not be at work. That might not allow them to reconnect to things that can make a big difference. And then that might go on, and just start getting in very, very formalised, where I think HR, they don't have the right type of training. I think if you go on a mental health first aid training or a wellbeing champion, I don't think that is going to be helpful in 90% of the cases, possibly more. I know people who worked in organisations and say, I don't like the wellbeing champion, I would never go and speak to them. So it doesn't work. You didn't check it out. And also just trying to reduce mental health to a list of labels. That person's depressed, that person's anxious, that person's got something else. It's like it doesn't give you the context, the story and understanding. So the way that we design the training and then the ways of categorizing are really not helpful. I mean, it's like you're really in a badly placed way of actually helping people. So I think we need different policies. Controversially, get rid of the sick note, which you can do for mental health. And I have got a policy around that. We'll be launching this year. And that's quite challenging, because what you should do as an organisation is we need to connect with that person. So don't allow them to go to a GP. The GP are not the best place to assess mental health. They're the least trained. So that's a really bad. And then it used to be better, but it's even worse now. I was involved with a charity that designed mental health training for the GP charity. GPs need more support. They get too many problems. People just turn up, tell them a story, I'll give you a sick note, and now you're removed. So that person's now got a label. Now you have to manage the label, not help the person understand the story and difficulties. So I think it's just the whole system's really badly designed and really not helpful to anyone who's got real challenges, and they quite often don't know what to do. They don't feel, am I allowed to go and have a conversation? Where if you start off, always trying to think, we need to connect with every member staff, we need a real relationship, and we need lots of mechanisms and opportunities to get involved. And then we need to think, how do we grow positive mental health in the organisation? And then if there's a difficulty, how we're going to deal with it, bespoke by default, which means We will have, in an organisation I work with, we'll sit down and we'll talk and say what we're going to do. The policies can guide us in one way or the other, but it's like, what are we going to do? This is a real case, real person, and now we have to work it out. And we'll do it collectively, we'll do it openly, and we'll support the person, we'll have conversations, and then we'll decide. And that might take a little bit more time. The cost of recruitment, the cost of having a member of staff and manage a member of staff that isn't working well in the team is distressing for everyone. It's very, very expensive. And then you're going back out of advert. So you might front load a lot more resource and it might take a little bit more time. But if you measured that over a year, you would use less time and less money. It's just because it's front loaded. And I think that's the problem. People would say this seems like a big investment, but it is. But the consequences is going to be quite positive for everyone involved, and it'll use up less time and resources. There's a psychologist in America that says the end of wisdom, that too many policies and procedures stop us thinking, they stop us using common sense and practical wisdom, and to stop us trying to work out what is the best thing to do. And I think there's too much of that happening, and that harms organisations and people.
What happens when reflective practice, supervision, and other well-being opportunities are not prioritised? Sadly, we get to see staff who struggle. People can believe that feelings related to vicarious trauma are their fault, or that their organisation just doesn't care about them. This can lead to poor morale, poor performance, and an increase in sickness and staff turnover.
Therefore, healing isn't only an individual responsibility, it's an organisational one. And it makes business sense. Less recruitment, less sickness, and greater staff retention. Who doesn't want that?
Also, we must consider the challenges of those who work in this field, who've lived experience related to trauma. People who've gone through trauma themselves often feel compelled to work helping others. Their compassion has often been supercharged, and this lived experience can make excellent staff. However, people still need to be aware of the triggers and how they prioritise their own well-being.
One way we've focused on staff is we do a decompression session on a Friday.
This is Iona Roberts, a frontline drugs worker taking the lead for trauma-informed care for her service.
So 4:15 till 5 o'clock. I run it one week and there's someone else who runs it the next. We invite staff upstairs because we've got a little group room upstairs to come and essentially decompress. Team leaders offer to kind of hold the fort down whilst we're up there. We've had art sessions, we're waiting for someone to do a meditation session. We've played double, just different games, because sometimes think when you're working right up to that last minute, you can be taking things home with you on a Friday. So that was one of the things that we tried to introduce, and that was just to show people that yes, we are trying to be more trauma informed for the clients, but this is also about you. And that was one practical thing that we did. Not everyone comes up to it. Some people would rather, I don't know, get some admin work done. But the fact that the offer's there, I think people appreciate, and it's shown, because it came from upper management as well, it's a dedication to their well-being. I have been told by quite a few members of staff that there has been a culture change. People are talking to each other more about, you know, difficult appointments that they may have been through or things that are going on with people on their caseload. We've got more people coming to the decompression sessions. There's more people coming to we call it a trauma-informed working group, because that's essentially what it is. It's just people working together to try and improve our practices. So it's slow, and I think there is always going to be people who just come to work and kind of just want to get on with what they've got to get on with. But ultimately, I think when you're working with people, you've got to keep trying pushing to make the services better. And even if it's a minority sort of doing different things throughout the month or year, you've got to keep going at it.
This is India Ellis, who has worked in challenging behaviour units and psychiatric wards.
The amount of times I've come into the office and I'm going, I can't do this anymore. and I cry or go, I'm having a crazy day. Everyone's doing my head in, and people are accommodating. That release needs to happen. It needs to happen because the more you suppress it, it doesn't work. And bringing in things like reflective practice, because you get your supervisions, but they're more task driven. Whereas reflective practice is all about looking about how you feel and reflecting literally on your practice, and that's helpful. My key focus is the relationship I have with my staff, checking in, spotting them early signs, putting them on the vicarious trauma training. Are they aware of vicarious trauma? It could be anything from a poster on a notice board where they can read at their own leisure and think, oh, I think I've just experienced that. I think I might need to just speak to my manager about that. Or having them open conversations. And being honest, it's like with this client group, if I'm having an off day, and this might be frowned upon of lots of professions, but if I'm having an off day, I might say to my client, do you know what? If I'm a bit stressed today, just know it's not you, it's me. The bloody washing machine's broken down, or I didn't get any sleep last night, but I'm here. Just be human, and I find being real works. Only you can do you. That's what I found out.
This is Dave Wall, a former drug and alcohol support worker.
Well, as a group, every 2 weeks in where I work now, we do reflective practice. So it's just people doing the same job, talk to each other, and I feel comfortable being really open and honest with them. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's me. Oh, and that's me. And that's me as well. It's good to know your colleagues are feeling the same way, or your colleague might say something and you might actually have something of value for them, and that'll make you feel better. Some of the things I do, that self-reflection, as quickly as possible. I've got an app on my phone where I do, what's triggered this behavior in me, how do I feel in terms of what feels threatened within me, what was my behavior like, and look at the outcome. What can I do? Is there any action to take? Do I need to hold my hand up and say I've got it wrong, or do I just need to swallow it, and take a bit of time? And then it's just that thing of yes, meditation's quite difficult. I'm not talking about getting a mat out and sitting in an open office meditating, but just something as simple as breathing exercises. Count your breathing. Just find a colleague who don't mind you ranting for 5 minutes and then rant over. Go. You've got to let this stuff out. Otherwise, you're just stocking it up and stocking it up. And a good rant, and then a bit of self-reflection and a bit of breathing exercises, or just fresh air, or go for a fag if you smoke. You just need that space. Otherwise, if you're not clearing it down as it comes in, it's just going to stock up and up and up and up.
Although vicarious trauma can be upsetting, it can also be seen as something to be managed rather than avoided. You are human. Being affected by people's experiences is normal. People have shown to have positive impacts to vicarious trauma. This can include feeling inspired about a person's resilience and seeing their own mental and emotional fortitude. A feeling of something called compassion satisfaction, which refers to the pleasure derived from working in this world, including feeling positively about the meaningfulness of your contribution to the work and the greater good of society. It reminds people to actively take steps to protect themselves and demonstrating effective self-compassion as a role model to others in their team.
We are a psychologically informed environment. We have our PI, as we say for short, reflective sessions on a monthly basis.
This is Anita Hemmings, who works with young adults.
And I do actually find those useful now. I never used to before, because it was like a griping session. And I even used to say, I don't see why I'm here, because I could be doing A, B, and C than sitting there listening to people bitching or whatever, But they're more useful now. And it also makes me realize, because it's with other team leaders, that actually I'm not on my own. they experiencing issues too. They've got their own traumas that they have to deal with, etc. But for me now, vicarious trauma needs to become prevalent now. People need to know about this more. Sort out training. It's also helped me to understand why I feel the way I do. I don't want to get to a stage where I am really, really done out. I don't draw my blinds. I don't want to go out. I don't want to go anywhere. I'm not even interested in seeing grandkids or kids or anything like that. I don't want to be in that position again because it is a dark place. I don't want to continue having the deep thoughts that I do. Which again, all this stuff, it's not me. And maybe a part of how society has changed, maybe that's all part of it. So I just think that the organizations need to get a grip on it, for their staff. I'm now really watching, I always watch staff, the mannerisms. I listen, I hear what they say, and sometimes you make your own summarization of a situation and that. And I know there's a couple of them. I will say, look, you are exhausted. You've got leave, whether it's a couple of days or you take an extended weekend, you have the Monday and the Friday off. I says, but you need a break. You need a break. And that's how I have to say, because I can see then, they're experiencing something. It may not be like what I'm experiencing, but they are experiencing something. And I need to be able to support them through it the best way that I can.
This is Amanda Chalmers, a trauma-informed consultant from Be Informed.
From what I've seen, it's sort of senior management and leads within services, and it's things like reflective practice. So actually sitting with staff and reflecting on, their work, on particular clients, championing the good work that they're doing. And I think that goes a long way. Clinical supervisions. There's a few services that do actually spend money on clinical supervisions, and they have people coming in for that, which I think is important because that gives staff a chance again to talk about how they're feeling, talk about any advice they need for some of the clients if they're stuck. That's always quite good for that. And then I think it's listening to staff and staff feeling valued and the fact that their voices are heard. That goes a long way for well-being. When you feel like a valued member of the team and that actually your voice is listened to. And there's a couple of services that I work with where the senior managers are really, really good at that. And from what I've seen, it's not sort of higher up than that. It tends to be really good managers within particular services who really don't just care about stats and everything. They actually really care about making sure the staff are well and the staff are looked after, and the staff are heard. And I think being heard and being valued is a massive part of your well-being when it comes to working in a team, definitely. It just seems that a lot of organisations, and this isn't just the services that I'm used to working in, this is big industry who have billions of pounds as well. They're just not interested in the well-being side of things, I don't think. That's the sort of feeling I get, because whenever you start to introduce well-being, it's sort of like, okay, well, maybe we haven't got budget for that just yet. All the physical stuff like manual handling, all that kind of stuff is dealt with and paid for. And, mental health first aid is what they'll put people on and think that that's great, that's all we need. But actually, it's much more than that. And I think right across the board, in any sort of job role or position, there's lots of people that are not feeling great, that are burnt out, unwell, and end up being off sick, or leaving roles when perhaps they're good members of the team as well, and they shouldn't be leaving the roles that they're in. So I do find it really, really sad that, there is simple things that can be done to support staff, but it's just not done. And a lot of ticky box things, such as like, we'll give a wellbeing day and we'll do, a few little bits and bobs for staff. We'll maybe do some games, or we'll do a Christmas competition or something like that. That just doesn't sort of start to touch the surface of what's going on underneath for people. So I've talked to many a staff member of certain institutions and organisations, shall we say, where they are seeing and hearing lots of horrific things most days, and they're expected just to get on with it.
So in this episode, we've had many ways where people have responded to this, really starting to consider what's in their gift to respond and how it's helping them in their professional lives. But I guess at this point, I just want people to think about not just their professional lives, but their personal lives as well. Because as we talked about in episode 1, this can come home with us. This can change who we are. So if we're thinking about stuff that we can do to respond to this in our work life, we need to think about how we bring that home with us as well, because we want to be the best partner we can be, the best child we can be, the best brother, sister, friend we can be to the people around us. And if we let this get a hold of us, then it will change who we are in our home life. And I guess no job, no experience should rob us of that. And this isn't to say that we shouldn't care about our jobs, because absolutely you should care, but you need to care about yourself as well.
I think this goes back a little bit to what I mentioned in the last episode too, about the frog in the boiling water. It's not just a frivolous or slightly facetious analogy, but it's also, if you consider the frog, it's oblivious to the harm that's being afflicted to it. But in this situation, unfortunately, people are completely oblivious to the harms that the impact that's having on them is having on the wider base, as you've said. The pain this can have on partners, children, parents, whoever, anyone in your immediate circle and beyond, it can be quite significant. And being aware of that, being able to not use it to punish yourself further, but use it to realize exactly what it is that has changed in your life and what then can be done to make things better for everyone. So that was the end of episode 3. Please join us again for episode 4, Changing the System, Building Trauma-Informed Cultures, where we'll talk more about systemic responses to vicarious trauma. Thank you very much. I've been Andrew James.
And I've been David Gill.
And thank you for listening to Frontline.